been a trucker for close to 15 years now. This happened in 2017, and to this day, I still get chills thinking about it. I was hauling a late-night delivery through the Mojave Desert, heading toward Arizona. I think it was a load of appliances, but honestly, I don't even remember anymore. What I do remember is the darkness. There were no street lights, no other vehicles, just pitch black emptiness in every direction. My truck's dim headlights barely lit up the road ahead, and I found myself squinting every few minutes just to make sure I wasn't drifting off the asphalt. I thought about pulling over and waiting for sunrise, but I couldn't afford to waste time. I was broke, and every hour counted. So I kept driving, even though something in my gut told me not to. Then, about an hour before sunrise, I saw something up ahead. At first, it was just a shadow, but it was moving, fast. Panic shot through me. A coyote? A deer? A person? I slammed on the brakes. My truck screeched to a stop, and my heart nearly pounded out of my chest. And then, I saw it. A car. A lone sedan, parked dead center on the highway, its hazard lights blinking like a heartbeat in the dark. The passenger door was wide open. Something about it felt wrong. My truck stopped barely a foot from the car's bumper. I sat there, gripping the wheel, waiting, watching. But no one got out. I should have just driven around it. I should have left. But curiosity got the best of me. I put the semi in reverse, pulled over, and stepped out into the silent, suffocating night. It was too quiet. No wind, no insects, nothing. The only sound was the steady click, click, click of the car's hazard lights. As I got closer, I saw that it was a red Ford Fusion. Looked almost brand new. But the open door, the way it was parked perfectly centered on the road, something about it made my skin crawl. I peeked inside. Empty. I checked the back seat. Nothing. No keys, no purse, no phone, no signs of life. That's when the hairs on my neck stood up. Someone had been here, recently, but they were gone now. I took a step back, scanning the darkness around me. My own breathing sounded too loud. The only thing my headlights illuminated was the stretch of road behind me, but beyond that, just endless blackness. I should have left. I know I should have. But something made me walk around to the trunk. I don't know why. Maybe I thought I'd find a clue. Maybe I was just being stupid. I gripped the handle and pulled. It wouldn't budge. Locked. I hesitated, then went back to the front seat and grabbed the keys from the ignition. Why were they still in the car? I unlocked the trunk and tried again. Still stuck. Something was jamming it from the inside. I moved to the back seat and pushed the center console down, and that's when I saw them. 3 garbage bags. They were bulging, tied shut with thick rope. My stomach twisted. I knew what I was looking at. My hands trembled as I reached for the nearest bag. I don't know why I did it. Maybe I thought I could still rationalize it. Maybe I needed to be sure. I was inches away when, boom! A gunshot split the silence like a lightning strike. I jolted, slamming my head on the roof of the car. Pain exploded through my skull, but all I could think was, run. I threw the keys onto the front seat, scrambled out of the car, and sprinted for my truck. Then I heard it. A voice. Rough, ragged, angry. Hey, hey, hey. I turned my head for a split second, and that's when I saw him. A short, stocky man with wild red hair, wearing dirty overalls and shin-high boots. In one hand, he held a rusted hunting rifle. In the other, a shovel. He wasn't running. He wasn't screaming. He was just staring at me. I lunged into my truck, slammed the door, and turned the key. Nothing. Come on, come on, come on. I twisted the key again. The engine sputtered, stalled. My hands were shaking so bad I nearly dropped the gear shift. When I finally looked up, he was standing right beside my truck. His mouth was moving, but I couldn't hear what he was saying. Then he dropped the shovel and raised his hands. Wait, wait. His voice wasn't angry anymore. He sounded desperate, but there was no way in hell I was stopping. The truck roared to life and I slammed on the gas. As I pulled away, I checked the rearview mirror. The man was running after me. For a few seconds, I thought he was going to chase me down, but then he stopped. He turned back to the car, grabbed something from the ground, and sprinted toward the driver's seat. My stomach dropped. He was coming after me. Minutes later, I saw the headlights in the distance, fast. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, breathless, trying to explain what was happening. The Ford was right behind me now, honking, swerving. I thought he was going to ram me. For 15 minutes, I drove as fast as I could, heart pounding, hands gripping the wheel so hard they ached. Then, flashing red and blue lights appeared up ahead. The Ford veered off into the desert, vanishing into the darkness. When the cops arrived, I told them everything, but they didn't chase him. They just took my statement. I was furious. I begged them to go after him, but they just told me they'd conduct a search once backup arrived. They never called me back. They never found the car. To this day, I don't know what was in those bags. I don't know what that man was doing in the middle of the road. Some people say he was disposing of a body. Others think he was burying something worse. All I know is, I've never driven through the desert at night again, and I never will. I'm sure you've seen those modern trucking videos. Truckers documenting their daily routines, giving tips, and showing life on the road. Maybe you haven't. But since I'm on the younger side of this industry, every time I open TikTok or YouTube Shorts, that's all I see. I won't get into my full backstory, but I had to drop out of a pretty prestigious university for personal reasons. People always tell me I could have been more than a trucker. But honestly, it's not a bad gig. I've been doing this for over 2 years now. The hardest part isn't the driving, it's the isolation. You never know how the loneliness will affect you until you experience it firsthand. My only advice: make peace with your demons. Because out there in the dead of night, when there's no one around, they will come for you. This happened 3 months after I started my first trucking job. I was still a rookie, just getting used to long-haul trips. That night, I was driving from southern New Jersey to Lafayette, Indiana, a 12-hour drive. It doesn't sound too bad except for one thing. I had already driven 8 hours straight before starting this trip. Yeah, I was exhausted, but I wanted to get my deliveries done as quickly as possible, so I kept pushing. I figured I'd reach Lafayette just before 3 a.m. The roads were empty. No traffic, no headlights, nothing. Just me and the dark highway stretching endlessly ahead. I was starting to feel drowsy, so I reached for a Red Bull from the center console. Nothing. I groaned. Of course, I'd forgotten to restock my truck after my last delivery. For a moment, I debated my options. Keep driving and risk falling asleep at the wheel, or stop somewhere and get an energy drink. Neither sounded good, but I had no choice. I pulled into the first service stop I saw, and that's when things started to go wrong. The place was dead. At first, I thought it was an old gas station, but as I got closer, I realized it wasn't. The pumps were rusted, the lights were off, and the entire station looked abandoned. The only thing still standing was a small convenience store, its dirty glass doors barely reflecting my headlights. I hesitated. This didn't look like a real stop, but I was too damn tired to keep driving without caffeine. I parked the truck and stepped out. The night was too quiet, no wind, no crickets, just silence. Something about that stillness made my skin crawl. I made my way to the store expecting one of two things. Either the door would be locked or it would be open and stocked with drinks. It was neither. The door swung open on its own, and inside, pitch black darkness. I stood there for a second, listening. Nothing. My phone flashlight flickered as I stepped in, my boots crunching on dust-covered tiles. Shelves were empty. The entire store had been stripped bare. But then, something caught my eye, a faint glow. It was coming from the back of the store. I moved toward it, my heart pounding faster with every step. There against the wall was an old refrigerator, the kind you'd see in a normal gas station. It was plugged in. I yanked the door open. Empty. Not just empty, gutted. No shelves, no racks, just a hollow, cold shell. I stared at it, confused. Why would an abandoned store have a working fridge with nothing inside? Then, clang! A metallic noise echoed through the store. Something had fallen. I froze. The sound came from the main room. Someone was in here with me. For 10 agonizing seconds, I stood completely still. My breath caught in my throat. Slowly, I peeked back into the front of the store. Nothing, but something felt wrong. I forced myself to turn around and walk out. I wasn't going to stick around and find out what was lurking in there. As I stepped outside, I glanced back one last time. The door was open. I was sure I had shut it. I hurried to my truck, trying to shake the unease creeping up my spine. I needed to get back on the road. Now. As soon as I merged onto the highway, I cracked open my energy drink and took a long gulp. The caffeine kicked in almost immediately, snapping me out of my haze. But my mind kept going back to that damn store. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe a squatter was living in there. Maybe some local kids were messing around. But one thing I couldn't explain. That fridge. Why was it plugged in? Who was using it? I didn't get much time to think about it, because that's when I noticed it. The curtain behind me was moving. Sweat dripped down my forehead. I kept my eyes on the rearview mirror, watching as the fabric shifted. There was no air conditioning on, no vents open. My blood ran cold. There's someone in my truck. A surge of panic shot through me, but I forced myself to stay calm. I discreetly reached for my phone and punched in the nearest police station. I wasn't going to confront whoever, or whatever, was back there. I just had to get there fast. For 20 agonizing minutes, I drove in silence, every second feeling like an eternity. I imagined a hand reaching out from behind me, a knife pressing against my throat. Finally, the police station came into view. I slammed on the brakes, parking as close as possible to the entrance. Then, I ran. Within seconds, officers surrounded my truck. One of them grabbed the door handle, nodded at me, and yanked it open. And that's when I saw them. 3 people. 2 men and a woman, wrapped in filthy rags, their eyes wide and unblinking. They were hiding in my truck. One of the men clutched 2 switchblades. As they were dragged out and cuffed, they never spoke. They just stared at me. Cold. empty, like they weren't even human. I never found out what they wanted. I don't want to know, but one thing still haunts me to this day. Where did they get in? And more importantly, were they already in my truck before I stopped? Or did they crawl in while I was inside that abandoned store? My name is Daniel, and I've been a trucker for different companies for the better part of 15 years. At this point, things have become pretty routine. Pick up the goods, verify them, and deliver them as instructed. Since we're not paid by the hour, efficiency is everything. For someone like me who's been doing this forever, I like to think I can outwork all the young guys snapping up these jobs. But that isn't always a good thing. Sometimes I push myself way too hard, running on barely any sleep. 4 years ago, I was working for a warehouse based in North Dakota. If you don't know, North Dakota is one of the flattest states, which makes trucking a little easier. It also meant that skipping sleep could be the difference between keeping a job and getting fired. It was a chilly Tuesday morning in May, the start of the week, which meant more loads to ship and more work for me. I wanted to get it all done in one shot, so I mapped my route into Montana, planning to drive straight through without stopping for rest. I hit the road a few hours after lunch, expecting to reach my destination early the next morning. I pushed the semi as much as I could, maybe a little over the speed limit. The hours dragged by and my eyes grew heavier. By midnight, I was struggling. My vision blurred, and I kept rubbing the crust from my eyelids. I had less than an hour left. Just a little more, I told myself. My buddy Tristan, also a trucker, had introduced me to smelling salts when I first started. They were small bottles of ammonia crystals, one whiff, and you were wide awake. But Tristan warned me they weren't something to overuse. The burn in your nose was sharp, but it worked. This was one of those moments. I grabbed the bottle, took a deep inhale, and felt my head jolt back. Adrenaline surged through me, my heart pounded, and for a moment I felt alive again. 30 minutes later, it stopped working. I was dozing off, my truck drifting onto the shoulder. The sudden rumble strip jolt snapped me awake. This was bad. I had to pull over, but the road stretched out endlessly, flanked by thick, unbroken woods. No rest stops, no pull-offs, nothing. I slowed down, scanning the darkness for a place to stop. My headlights pierced through the void, illuminating every detail in front of me. That's when I saw it. A purple dress, lying in the middle of the road. I blinked. Was I hallucinating? No. It was real. I rolled past it, staring in confusion. It should have been a red flag, but I was too exhausted to process it. Then, 200 yards ahead, I saw a pair of shoes. My stomach twisted. What the hell was going on? I passed them, gripping the steering wheel tighter. My dad, Robert, was a religious man, and I still carried his old cross. I clutched it and muttered a silent prayer. And then, I saw more clothing, scattered across the road. Some of it was children's clothes. I hit the brakes. Something was very, very wrong. I sat there, gripping the wheel, my breath shallow. The truck idled, its engine humming in the eerie silence. Nothing happened. No movement, no sound. But I couldn't ignore it. My instincts screamed at me to stay inside. But something about those tiny clothes. What if there were kids out there? I stepped out. The cold air bit into my skin, waking me up even more. My boots crunched against the pavement as I approached the pile. They were definitely children's clothes, both boys and girls. I scanned the woods, pitch black. Something felt off. I turned, ready to get back in my truck, when, crunch, a footstep to my left. I spun around, heart hammering in my chest. I stared into the trees, but I couldn't see anything. The silence stretched on for what felt like forever. Then, crunch, this time to my right. I ran. I sprinted back to the truck and flung myself inside. Just as I slammed the door shut, a scream, a child's scream. It came from the woods. I froze. My chest rose and fell rapidly. Then another scream. Identical. Something was wrong. I turned the truck toward the sound, my headlights flooding the trees. And then I saw them. 3 or 4 people. One of them was holding a massive speaker. As soon as the light hit them, they ducked behind the trees. But I saw enough. They were playing fake screams, trying to lure me in. I couldn't breathe. My hands shook as I reached for my phone. I started dialing 911. Thump. Something hit the side of my truck, hard. I whipped around, but I couldn't see anything. My body went cold. Then, from the other side of the road, a man stepped out. He shouted something I didn't understand. Then, he threw something at my truck. Crack. My passenger side window shattered. I floored it. I didn't look back. I didn't stop. For the next hour, I drove in silence. I finally made my delivery and collapsed in exhaustion, sleeping for 10 straight hours. When I woke up, I immediately called the police. They said they'd investigate the woods. They never got back to me. To this day, I have no idea what those people were planning. Why didn't they just rush me when they had the chance? What would have happened if I had gone into those trees? I've been a trucker for 15 years. I've seen a lot of things, but nothing has ever been as terrifying as that night.